What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Whenever we hear of animated movies, we might think of cute cartoons and maybe with a nice social message like Inside Out or Zootopia. But what if I tell you that there are some animated films that were so controversial that they were either heavily censored or just straight up banned entirely? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be discussing today. So get ready to be shocked, weirded out, and maybe even a little impressed. After all, animated doesn't always have to mean kid-friendly, right? Just look at The Simpsons or Bojack Horseman. Let's begin.
Far out.
Fritz the Cat, 1972. Okay, so we're starting this list with one of my favorites, because why not? For those who haven't watched it, Fritz the Cat is this adult animated black comedy with a funky, womanizing cat at the center of it all. Yeah, as the name suggests. He drops out of college and goes on an unforgettable journey, including starting riots in Harlem, living it up with his girlfriend, partaking in orgies, and becoming a political revolutionary of the left. Sounds insane for an animated film, right? Well, that's because it was meant to be so. But if you look beyond the sex and drugs, you find a film that's genuinely smart and does justice to the satire genre. It also took the bold decision of making an unlikable main character. So if you couldn't tolerate Fritz, the film succeeded in its mission. But naturally, this level of adult themes and nudities, even if it's just cats, was a big no-no back in the 70s, and there was a shit ton of outrage around this film. Director Ralph Bakshi himself said that a lot of people got freaked out, and that to these people who loved it, it was a huge hit, and everyone else wanted to kill me. The film was also banned in Malaysia, the Maldives, New Zealand, Singapore, and even Spain. And instead of being remembered as an animated film that was revolutionary in switching up the genre, it's now remembered as the first X-rated animated film in the US. One hell of a legacy nonetheless, though. Now, if you haven't watched it, go check it out on Amazon Prime right now. Tarzoon, Shame of the Jungle, 1975. While Fritz the Cat has some nuance and depth if you look really hard, this one has none of that. It's a straight-up nonsense comedy that has no sense of political correctness. I guess that's what the 70s were all about. So Tarzoon, Shame of the Jungle was a parody of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan, and boy, was it completely unhinged. It had this evil Queen Bazonga. Yep, that was indeed her name because she had multiple breasts and lived in a cave that looked like a woman spreading her legs. I'm trying my best not to be too explicit here since we don't want to get demonetized. But anyway, she was also bald and wanted a hair transplant from this other girl called June, and sent these penis-shaped soldiers, don't ask guys, to go after her. And then came our Tarzan, whose name is Shame, and he's the ruler of the jungle, basically. And basically, he's the ruler of the jungle. He has to save his woman June from the wrath of the queen and her phallic army. For very obvious reasons, the film was initially straight-up banned in New Zealand, only to be released many years later with an R16 rating. The film was also banned in Ireland. The US and UK slapped it with an X rating, which also reduced its distribution, and of course, there was heavy censoring everywhere. The uncut version was around 80 minutes and was released in very few places. Now, I would ask you to hunt the internet for the OG version, but I'm not sure it's worth it, guys. But you can just watch it on the Internet Archive if you're really that curious. Watership Down, 1978. Now this film was genuinely an amazingly moving film, even if it had to go to some drastic and graphic lengths to achieve that. It was based upon Richard Adams' novel with the same name and revolved around a colony of rabbits trying to escape the destruction of their home by human developers. It was violent, graphic, and bloody, but with a powerful message. Naturally, it ran into trouble. The film was classified in the UK as U, which is suitable for all, and that led to parents complaining for about 4 decades because the film had traumatized their children. Finally, after like 44 years, the film was re-rated as PG. Critics described it as a film that arguably traumatized an entire generation. But I will say that the story this film covered is important to convey to children, maybe not in a very graphic form though. Did any of you watch it as a child? What did you guys think? We've got yet another Ralph Bakshi brainchild on our list, and this one too was just as misunderstood as the first. The film revolves around three characters, Brother Rabbit, Preacher Fox, and Brother Bear, as they take over an organized crime racket in Harlem while combating racism and corruption. It's actually a really great satire on the institutionalized racism rampant in both the Hollywood film industry as well as America as a whole. But of course, that message got lost, and institutions chose to focus on the racial stereotypes without considering the intent or the context. So even though the film wasn't banned, it faced heavy protests, with Paramount Pictures dropping the film and pretty much removing it from theaters immediately after its initial release. The film even changed its title to salvage some of its reputation and still gather an audience. If you want my 2 cents, this was a disservice done to a film that was trying to do something bold. Instead, it was taken at face value, maligned, and mislabeled. Heavy Traffic, 1973. Clearly, my guy Bakshi could not be stopped, and post Fritz the Cat, he continued with Heavy Traffic in 1973, the very next year. This was one of his most personal works, and like all his films, it is crude, wild, very offensive, and of course, a satire. Much like Fritz the Cat, this one too explored the seedy life of New York by following a cartoonist and his fantasies. If you ask me, it's all about a man figuring out women, and life. So no surprises here that it's slightly inspired by Bakshi himself. But hey, Heavy Traffic turned out to be one of his best works, so maybe he should have made more semi-autobiographical films. Now coming to the juicy bit, the film was banned in many countries, including Ireland, New Zealand, and even Canada. In the UK and US, the film got an X rating, which was hell of severe for animated films back then, but I must say, deserved. The film did have a whole lot of violence, nudity, misogyny, and blatant racism. It's actually really polarizing, with some who love it and others who hate it. There is no in-between. Which side are you on, guys? Comments down below, please. Once Upon a Girl, 1976. This one's a straight-up collection of pornography. That's honestly the best way to describe it. I'm not sure what the directors had in mind or what they were going for. The plot is centered around this lewd old woman, Mother Goose, who's on trial for spreading obscenity by telling people the true versions of fairy tales. Believe me, guys, if you watch this film, you'll never see Cinderella or Red Riding Hood the same again. I legit have trauma and stopped watching like 20 minutes in. If you're above 18, go watch it and see how long you last. And parents, keep it out of the hands of children by all means. It's obviously an X-rated film, and while there exists no record of the film being officially banned, we reckon it was pretty heavily censored because, duh, it's explicit and erotic and pointless. Down and Dirty Duck, 1974. Considering the fact that this film was also titled Dirty Duck and Cheap, we sure know what we're getting into. We see a lonely insurance man named Willard team up with a brothel-going, foul-mouthed duck to try to be a little less uptight and hopefully get laid. And from there, things get wild. There is no way you could guess the ending, so I won't spoil it for you. As you can expect, the lonely man has a bunch of sexual fantasies, which means there's sex, nudity, vulgarity, and the whole shebang. It wasn't banned, but it did face heavy criticism and even censorship in advertising. I mean, the New York Times refused to run ads and reviews for this film. It also didn't get an official X rating because they never actually submitted it to the MPAA. Instead, they gave themselves the X rating as a marketing strategy to promote the film. Interesting idea. But hey, not all is bad. Some people genuinely did enjoy the film for its unique animation and soundtrack. I'm not one of those people, but I promise they do exist. Belladonna of Sadness, 1973. Now, this one's a genuinely interesting entry. It isn't just some porno spoof or some nonsensical fun story of a duck. It's controversial and actually makes people think. Belladonna of Sadness revolves around Jean, a peasant girl who gets raped by a feudal lord. So she seeks revenge by making a deal with the devil. Now, the first 40 minutes or so of the film are absolutely horrific and will make you miserable. There are some very intense and graphic scenes of sexual violence, rape, and even murder. But let me tell you, it's going to be worth it. The colorful psychedelic visuals are absolutely gorgeous. Even the soundtrack is worth noting. The film, of course, tackles themes like misogyny, feudalism, and female liberation, but most noteworthy is its overarching theme of lust. Not just lust for sex, but also lust for power and love. While the film is considered a cult classic and is cinematically a brilliant watch, the graphic and violent scenes did lead to some solid censoring, where the director, Eiichi Yamamoto, had to create a shortened version of the film by shaving off around 8 minutes worth of sexual violence. This is one of those films where the nudity and violence actually feel like they serve a purpose. That too, a purpose greater than just sex. Trust me, there is nothing erotic about this film. Fantastic Planet, 1973. Yet another masterpiece entry on our list. Fantastic Planet by René Laloux shows us a futuristic alternative reality where humans have been enslaved by aliens. But one brave human manages to run away with all the alien tech and starts a human uprising. Does it sound familiar? Despite the futuristic setting, Laloux was actually talking about the past, the recurring history that the world faces time and again. It tells a story of oppression, anti-authoritarianism, and class struggle, all of which were extremely relevant back in the 70s. You can relate it to the American Civil War, apartheid in South Africa, and of course the Holocaust. And if the thematic richness wasn't enough, the film is also visually captivating. The animation feels like it's straight out of a Salvador Dali painting, or Edvard Munch's The Scream. Know what I'm talking about? Now, considering how politically charged it is, it faced some trouble when production was halted by Soviet censorship. The film was also trimmed and censored for the English language version. So if you want to watch it uncut, go watch the French original, and I'm sure it'll live up to the hype I created. Wizards, 1977. Ralph Bakshi is back, baby, and this time with some strong themes of war, fascism, and the rise of dictatorships. Wizards shows us a post-apocalyptic Earth that has already survived a nuclear war and has taken 2 million years to get back to normal. Except nothing is normal. Humans are mutated, and trolls, fairies, and elves are all back in the picture. But in all this hubbub, an evil wizard has risen to power named Black Wolf, and all that's left in his path is his twin brother Avatar, who's also a wizard. And let me tell you, this film uses real-life Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler footage. So if you can imagine how people reacted to that, especially parents, since it originally got a PG rating, it did not sit well with them. It didn't get any official ban or censorship, which is a first for Bakshi, but the controversy was unavoidable. The film is overall a pretty decent one. It also has those zany psychedelic visuals like Fantastic Planet, and truly feels like a surreal trip. Some people do find it to be a little too on the nose. I mean, using Nazi footage in a film about dictatorships cost it some of its subtlety, but nonetheless, a pretty good film. The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, 1974. The womanizing cat is clearly here to stay, and it returns in The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat. But unfortunately, this isn't a Bakshi flick and is instead directed by Robert Taylor. In this film, we see Fritz living the full-on domestic life with a wife and little baby kitten. But knowing Fritz, of course, he gets bored of it and instead goes on a marijuana trip to imagine what his life could have been. He lights up that J and gets hell of high. And that's pretty much the film. It does still retain its humor and has that element of dark satire through and through, but it's not as good as Fritz the Cat. But hey, barely any future Ralph Bakshi films managed to meet that standard. But like its predecessor, it faced bans and censorship, just not as much, if that's any relief. The nudity, sex scenes, violence, and drug use obviously led to controversy and edits, but the film was outright banned in Ireland, Singapore, and many provinces of Canada. And in the US, it got slapped with an R rating. No surprises there. Allegro Non Troppo, 1976. Next on our list is an Italian entry by Bruno Bizzetto that parodies Walt Disney's 1940 film Fantasia. It's not entirely a parody either, more of a challenge, a real witty one at that. The film is set to 6 pieces of classical music that are being created by an orchestra of sweet Italian nanas. Plus, it's not just a comedy or a tragedy, it's all of it in different segments. The animation is amazing, the humor is crazier, and honestly, it's an overall upgrade from Fantasia, if you ask my opinion, and most reviews are overwhelmingly positive. But there was also content related to abuse and other adult stuff, because of which the English dubbed versions were greatly censored. Around 10 minutes of footage was snipped to try and make the film appeal to a wider audience, which is honestly a shame and a disservice to the original Italian material. But what can you do? That's just how censorship worked back then. Cleopatra, Queen of 1970. We've got yet another Japanese anime film on our hands, Cleopatra, Queen of also known as Cleopatra, and it obviously has a lot of sex, as the name suggests, but it's actually more than that. The story revolves around these three humans who manage to travel back in time to ancient Egypt. They're there to somehow stop an alien invasion, but one of them gets sidetracked and begins flirting with Cleopatra to become her lover. We also get to witness firsthand the romance between Cleopatra and Caesar and Mark Antony. Now, unfortunately, due to its name and its connotations, it didn't get the recognition it deserved, but oh well. The film also wasn't all that explicit to be banned or anything. It did that whole strategy of self-applying an X rating to the film in posters and ads. And while it did get some attention going, the end result did backfire. There was a shit ton of controversy since the film was marketed as hardcore but obviously didn't deliver on that front. I guess people were disappointed, but that was only the US release. Japan had no such confusion and just restricted it to adult audiences only. Fair enough. The Hand, Ruka, 1965. Let's just begin by saying that The Hand is an allegorical masterpiece. It has everything that's lacking in Wizards and conveys the same themes, but with so much more nuance and subtlety. The story follows a potter who is asked by a hand to make a sculpture resembling it. And no matter how much the potter says no and tries to escape its clutches, the hand will not budge on its demands and just gets more and more threatening. Yep, you already know it. This film is all about authoritarianism and totalitarianism, but shown so beautifully through this simplistic animation style. And that's not all. The film becomes even more impressive when you consider the context in which it was made. It reflected the plight of artists who suffered in communist Czechoslovakia. The film was entirely made by Jiří Trinka, and it was actually his last film before he died a few years later. And it was banned and confiscated by the Soviet-controlled Czechoslovakian government. What's funny is that it wasn't banned during its initial release, but only when Trinka died. I guess the censor boards finally realized what the message of the film was. Slow much? Now you guys believe me when I say the film is haunting, magical, and groundbreaking. You seriously need to watch it if you haven't already. Lupin III, The Secret of Mamo, 1978. Next up, we've got a film based on a manga. Lupin III, The Mystery of Mamo, was based on Lupin III by Monkey Punch, but was like the tamer version of it. Yeah, imagine that. The story's about this master thief named Lupin who gets involved with this elusive figure known by the name Mamo. Now, the film has quite a bit of sex and nudity, also violence and profanity and all your usual culprits, but unfortunately, no bans here. Just a bunch of censorship and licensing problems. The later DVD releases had to cut out stuff like product placements and character references. So yeah, nothing too major. Now, I'll tell you what's good about the film. Definitely the music, humor, and how insane the plot gets. But it's far from perfect. You could totally give it a watch, just don't go in expecting a masterpiece. Animalympics, 1979. And last but not least, we've got Animalympics. And let me tell you, it has an interesting story. The film is basically a fictional broadcast of the first ever Animal Olympics. Yep, fun idea, right? It's being streamed by the Zoo television network and has a bunch of Olympic games both summer and winter, including skiing and races and even gymnastics. Right off the bat, it has some really nice animation and it's cheesy in the best way possible. But it ran into trouble. Not because of any explicit content, but because of global politics. Yes, that's right. This underrated gem went under the radar all because of the two major global powers back then. What happened was that the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, which resulted in an immediate boycott of all things Russian, including the 1980 Moscow Olympics. Unfortunately, with that boycott, NBC also canceled the Animalympics special. But the film is available pretty easily nowadays, so go check it out for a fun, casual watch. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we come to the end of the list. I think it's safe to say that animated doesn't automatically mean child-friendly. Why should it be? We adults also deserve some fun, right? While some of the films on this list are just R-rated for R-rated's sake, others genuinely have good material hiding underneath all the censorship. So don't judge a book by its cover and go give these films a proper shot. They might just surprise you. Let us know which ones you liked and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.